Hello, and welcome to Movers, Shakers, Designers, Makers. I'm Steve Carpenter, Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture here at Penn State. Today, I am happy to be having a conversation with one of our volunteers whose impact has and will continue to have a profound impact on the students in our well-respected Department of Landscape Architecture. That department has an undergraduate program ranked #1 by Design Intelligence in 2019. Today, I have with me Andy Witkin, President and CEO of Witkin Holtz and Partners in Hollywood, Florida. Andy has dedicated decades of energy and service to his alma mater, strengthening and mentoring the next generation of landscape architects. He's served on our philanthropic council since 2008 and has recently joined the advisory council for the Stuckman School. Andy has been invited as a 2021 Fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, or ASLA. So this seemed like the perfect time for me to sit down with Andy as my guest and learn more about his passion for giving back to Penn State. Andy, welcome, and thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Steve, it's an absolute pleasure, really, and an honor to be here with you today, and I do appreciate the opportunity.
Great. We've had brief conversations previously, but feel this one's a bit special to talk to you about what it is that you do in the guise of giving back to Penn State generally, but to the college and to landscape architecture as not only our program here in the department, but also to the profession. So Andy, listen, you left Penn State in 1979 with a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture degree. And less than 10 years later, you started your firm in South Florida. And there you've been there ever since. So you moved from Happy Valley, the climate that we have here, down to the climate in Central Florida. I want to start by rewinding a bit to the beginning of your Penn State experience before we jump into your work and your activities with our alumni. So if you would, tell me about the path that took you to Penn State. In other words, why Penn State?
Actually, I think I really have two paths to Penn State. First, coming as a student, and then the second, 30 years later, really re-engaging with Penn State. But I went to high school in New York City, and I lived with my mom. My folks were divorced. My dad was in Philly. And when I began applying to schools, my dad said, you really should think about Penn State. I know a lot of people that have gone there, and they really just have a quality education. So I applied to all the schools. I applied to Penn State. I think the funny thing is, I thought I had good grades. The grades I had then, which got me into every university, I would never get into Penn State today. It's become so competitive and such an amazing institution. I don't think I ever would have gotten it, but fortunately I did. And I went from an urban environment, Queens, New York, and the first campus I went to is Mont Alto campus. So I drive up there with my dad, and I've got cows in the backyard of my dorm. And I don't think I'd ever seen a cow in my life. And the wonderful thing about it is it gave me an amazing appreciation for the exterior environment, which I really had not had that. So when I was at Penn State, Mont Alto campus, I met with an advisor. He said, yeah, have you ever heard of landscape architecture? I said, no. Well, why don't you take a course or two? And I did, and it became a passion. And went up to main campus the year after that. And you said graduate, back in the 70s. I'm showing my age here. And it's really one of the best decisions I ever could have made. It's not just an academic education. It's an amazing, well-rounded education that Penn State provides.
Nice. Yeah. So back in the 1900s, as I like to call it.
Yeah. Absolutely correct. And it was the 1900s.
Yeah. So, if I could just ask a little bit, probe a little bit deeper. So you mentioned you talked to a faculty member who said, have you ever considered landscape architecture? Do you remember the nature of that conversation before that recommendation? What was it about what you said or what you were interested in that prompted the recommendation of landscape architecture?
I was admitted to Penn State as a business major. My dad was an accountant, so naturally I was going to be a business major. After one day, I realized I don't really want to be a business major. And he asked me, what do you like? I said, well, I always like sketching. I always like thinking about design. And that's when we talked about architecture and then landscape architecture. And the more I talked about landscape architecture, I said, this really sounds like it's something I'd really enjoy. So having an amazing, I was very fortunate, I had just a great advisor at the university to kind of guide me into that direction.
It's so important to have people around you who are willing to listen and to answer questions, and then to put possibilities or options in front of you. So it sounds like you had just that kind of person as that faculty member, that advisor, listening to you and then putting opportunities in front of you. I think to me, that's a powerful example of, and maybe I'm stretching here, but it sounds maybe that was a major influence on what you've been doing for the discipline and for students here at Penn State.
Well, as I've always said, to me, the students are the future. I'm not a golfer, but I say I'm on the back nine of life. The students are on the front nine, and the world is going to be shaped by what the students do. So anything we can do to help, it's a benefit to everybody. And when we talked about my journey to Penn State, I briefly mentioned that I really have two journeys. The first journey from high school to college, and then the other journey 30 years later when I re-engaged with the university. And that to me has been unbelievably meaningful in meeting with the students, and really what I've given, what I've gotten back from giving to the university. I get a lot more than what I give. I really do believe that. And if I digress a little bit, giving has always been what I've been brought up with. I was very fortunate. My grandfather was an immigrant from Hungary, came over with a lot of other Eastern Europeans, in the late 1800s, ended up in New York, and he became an orthodontist. And actually, he was one of the pioneers of orthodontistry. So his office was just off of Park Avenue in New York. So as a kid, I'd take the subway, go visit him. And I'd go in there, and it would be the most amazing aromas you could ever imagine, because about 1/3 of his patients never paid him a dime. They couldn't afford it. But his feeling was, if your child needs braces, I'm going to give it to him, and pay me whatever you can. So 1/3 of them would just come in with food. So if anybody was ever hungry, there was a great place to go, because the office was just loaded with food. And I was very fortunate. In the 1960s, I was being taught a lesson I probably didn't even know back then, but it stayed with me throughout my career, throughout my life, about giving back.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Look, I want to talk to you about that second journey back to Penn State, but before I do, let's talk about maybe that middle space between your first journey and your second journey. Your interest in and essentially your being is grounded in what you just mentioned, this idea of giving. But you've given a lot to people, but you've given to the discipline by, I think, elevating the profile of landscape architecture ever since you founded your firm, Witkin, Holtz and Partners. And you've done that from my perspective through the promotion of environmental issues, education within the building industry, your advocacy for the profession at so many levels. And what gets me is many people do that, Andy, but you do it pro bono. You do this without a fee coming back. I mean, I'm sensing that story you just told me about your grandfather may have informed that, but you're not being paid to do this work. What motivates you to do this work pro bono?
I'm very passionate about landscape architecture. I think landscape architects have an amazing ability to help shape the environment and help shape people's experiences. What we do, we are making people's lives better. So when I started my firm in 1988, I kind of realized in my mind that the South Florida building community really did not recognize or realize the what a landscape architect can bring to their projects. So when I started the firm, I had the time to really decide what is it I want to do. So I got involved with different organizations. I got involved with the Builders Association. I sat on the Shoreline Review Committee of Miami-Dade County for about 12 years, and basically just trying to educate the local community as to what landscape architects bring to a project. We're not the guys who just put the plants in the ground. You know, we're creating places, we're creating spaces. We are making life better for people. You know, sea level rise, environmental issues. We've got the Everglades here, an unbelievable environmental resource. And people need to be aware of that. So for whatever reason, I just kind of took it upon myself to be the one to be the voice. And people listened. You know, what I've seen in Miami over the past 10, 20 years has been absolutely amazing.
You said that phrase, you took it upon yourself to be the voice. Was it that you saw that there were no other voices, or was it that there were voices, but they weren't resonating with people?
There definitely were voices. There were some wonderful landscape architects prior to me who were really making their mark in South Florida, but I just felt it could go to a different level. And I just kind of took it upon myself to try and be the one to go to that level. And I was also very fortunate that some of the others who had already been there saw what was happening, and they jumped in also. So it wasn't a one-person show here by no means. It was definitely a wonderful effort by numerous landscape architects here in South Florida to really educate the building community as to what we can bring to the table.
Sure. I'm imagining just, previous conversations with you. I'm imagining so many facets of who you are enabled you to connect to so many different people. I see you as an educator. I see you as an advocate for the professional landscape architecture. I see you as an environmentalist, a humanitarian at some level. If you could pick a moment or two, a key moment in your experiences doing this work, being a voice for the profession, what might you share with us as a key moment or two?
Probably a key moment was, and I'll get back to the Builders Association, which was and still is a great organization of all the local builders. Through the work I did, I was actually installed into the Builders Hall of Fame, and I'm the only design professional ever to be in that.
Wait a minute. Builders Hall of Fame, and you're the only designer who has been entered into this Hall of Fame.
Correct. Everybody else is either a builder, an attorney, some other role in the building industry, construction related. But from a design perspective, I'm the only design professional ever inducted into the Builders Association of South Florida Hall of Fame. And so I guess that to me has been really a wonderful moment that what I brought to the industry was recognized.
That's powerful. I would imagine you didn't strive, just again, knowing what I know of you from our previous conversations, I imagine you weren't setting out to have that recognition, but it was the work that you were doing for the purpose of helping other people and advancing the profession. It was recognized by this association in this group. And to honor you that way, to me, seems to be quite a powerful testament to the work that you do. That's really impressive, Andy.
It was, and still has been really unbelievably meaningful. And what made it probably even more meaningful was my father attended, and shortly thereafter he passed away. So it was really a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Well, that's great to know that he was able to see you receive that honor and to be recognized by other professionals. That's fantastic. So speaking of being honored, I want to talk a little bit about the ASLA Council of Fellows. Looking over the material that was submitted for your nomination, I was impressed by many aspects of it, but there's a section called Service to Our Future. And if I could, I'd like to read a sentence that starts off that section. It says, Andrew firmly believes that students are our future. You mentioned this earlier. You mentioned that phrase earlier in our conversation. The future of our profession, of our environment, and our world. Andy, there's a lot to unpack in that brief statement. Andrew firmly believes that students are our future, the future of our profession, our environment, and our world. So let's start unpacking, if we could, with your commitment to students studying landscape architecture at Penn State. This brings us to your second visit, or your second time here at Penn State. I know you have personally mentored several students every year from Penn State, and you've endowed 3 scholarships in perpetuity. There has to be a level of joy in doing these things that is similar to, but different from, that other work that you've done for the profession. I'm interested in hearing about your motivation for giving back to the profession directly to students generally, but directly to students at Penn State more specifically.
Giving back, and again, I'll go back, to my grandfather. It was actually my first year at Penn State, and my grandfather wrote me a letter, which I still have today, some 50 years later almost, and said, when one gives, they receive in proportion to what they give. And it's just been what I've really lived by. And I was very fortunate. I got out of school without any debt. My father paid for my education. And the more I talk to people, I realize how much student debt there really is, and how the tuition becomes an obstacle for many students to continue their education. So when my dad passed away, I wanted to do something to honor him. So my wife and I, Judy, we started our first memorial trustee scholarship, because I really felt that money is a difference if a student goes to school or not. It's life-changing. And then we were able to endow a second memorial trustee scholarship. And I've been unbelievably fortunate. I've met almost every scholarship recipient. At the endowment luncheon that the university puts on, they pair, those that endow a scholarship with the students that receive it. And I've met really just about every student, and it's unbelievably rewarding. And I've kept in touch with some of them throughout the years. And then my firm, we just recently endowed an equity educational scholarship for diversity and inclusion. And again, it's all trying not to level the playing field, for lack of better words, and to give everybody an equal opportunity to get that education, to really be able to make a difference in the world. So that's kind of really the background of where my philosophy of giving has come from. And the letters I received from the students, meeting the students, Bobby Corner used to say, Andy, we change the world one person at a time. And that's what, I really believe we're doing.
That's it. Well, I was wondering about what you get back in return. And it's not that you're looking to get anything back, but what you get back is a degree of satisfaction. You probably receive a sense that, like you said, you're making a difference in the world one student at a time, but to know that you have met virtually all of the students that have benefited from the scholarships that you have set up, it has to be extremely rewarding.
It's unbelievably rewarding. And that's what I said. I really firmly believe I get back more than I give. I really do. Meeting with the students, hearing what their dreams are, what their aspirations are, how they want to do such wonderful things for the environment. It's what energizes me. I've had my firm now for 33 years, and I need, my role is to energize everybody here in the office, lead, give direction. But, like everybody else, we all need some energy somewhere. And I really get my energy from the students and from what I get back from them and their wonderful outlook on life right now. So that is really what feeds me. It's the energy that I get back.
Fantastic. I'm so moved by the fact that you've been able to set up these 3 scholarships, but it's the last scholarship The first two, you and Judy set those up, but the last one where you bring your firm in and you say, look, this isn't just me. This is a cultural, by culture, I mean the way we do things around here. This is a way of being in the world. You're actually extending your way of being in the world, not just as a professional, but as a generous soul, as someone giving back to the profession. You're embedding that within the culture of your firm. That must be pretty powerful. Powerful opportunity is not really what I'm trying to say. That's another level for you to give back. You're giving back to the profession through these acts of generosity that are modeled for and then collaborated with members in your firm.
So probably the best part of it is that the equity educational scholarship was not my idea. It was my partner's idea. We made two folks in the office who'd been with us 10, 12, 13 years, and we made them partners last year. So one of our first partners meeting, they said, we want to give back like you've been giving back. Yeah. And they said, what opportunities are there at Penn State? And the educational equity scholarship idea had just come out by, I believe it was the dean who brought up that idea. And they, I said, well, how about this? And we have, a very inclusive office here. And it was their idea that, hey, that's the scholarship that fits who we are. That's the vision of the company. That's the values of the company. That's a scholarship that we want. So I can't take credit for, initiating the scholarship. I give that credit to my partners.
And I can't take full credit for the idea of the scholarship. That was the President Barron, and the university. However, I will take credit for getting the word out. And I'm so pleased that you and your firm received that word. And just for people who are watching this and might not know, those educational equity scholarships have two criteria and two intentions. One, to support students in need, and two, those students would then, through their presence, diversify the population of the campus and our college. So thank you, Andy, you and your associates there. We really, really thank you, and the students thank you as well. I'd like to return back to this ASLA fellow, Andy. This is a very recent designation for you. We're having this conversation actually about a month before you'll be celebrated as a fellow during the ASLA conference. I have two questions for you, knowing that the conference is in the future. These questions are projections into the future, if you will. First, what is it about the ASLA conference and your induction as a fellow that you're looking forward to the most?
I think it's getting the recognition from my peers. What I've done somewhat quietly, for lack of better words. That's just who I am. I just do it because it's the right thing to do and I want to do it. But to be recognized on a national level by my peers is wonderfully rewarding. What else is going to be rewarding is one of the students who received the scholarship money, who's an amazing young lady, is going to be joining me. I asked her to join me as a guest at the awards banquet.
Oh, that's good.
Angelique Easley, who graduated a couple years back from landscape architecture at Penn State, would say she and I have continued communication, and I invited her to be a guest at the award ceremony. So it all begins to tie back in.
It does. Oh, that's really meaningful. Second question, Andy, and this again, projecting in the future, I ask all of my guests to talk about what they're optimistic about. What developments in their work are they most looking forward to, or might be most exciting to them? So if you would, can you share with us what you're optimistic about at this point about your work? What is there something that's particularly exciting at the moment that you're looking forward to in your professional world?
We're very fortunate. We've got a number of really diverse projects on the boards. But I think what's probably the most exciting is really seeing how Miami has developed. Not necessarily as my work, but being here for 41, 42 years now. When I came down, Miami was still a sleepy little city. People know South Beach. It's exciting. It's a cosmopolitan area. They don't realize that when I came down here, it was a retirement community. All these hotels in South Beach are these high-end boutique hotels that everyone in the world wants to be at. They were old retirement communities. And seeing how Miami has become this wonderful cosmopolitan city, a culturally diverse city, I like to think we've had a hand in that. We've been around for 33 years. And when I drive through Miami and I say, hey, we did that project, we did that one, we did that one, or someone reaches out to us who may not know the firm. Well, what have you done? And I begin rattling off. They said, we had no idea you did that. So to have been a part of how Miami has really become an international destination, and I like to think our firm has really been one of the leaders in the design field in creating that destination. So that's really the exciting part. And I see there's even more to come from a design perspective. And we're trying to, in our office here, really design some spaces that are unique, especially in an urban environment. The outdoor spaces, and also especially with COVID lately, the outdoor spaces have become more critical than ever. And I like to think that the design we do in multiple projects really provides exterior opportunities for people. So I'm really excited to see what's happening in Miami. Out of everything, it's just really how the city has grown.
Yeah, it must be amazing to know you've literally had a hand in influencing and shaping the look and the design of a city, and through doing that, shaping the culture. Where the kids say the vibe of the place, in part is due to you and the work of your firm. That has to be rewarding as much as it is exciting.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. And I'll segue back a little bit. For 12 years, I served on the Shoreline Development Review Committee down here. And basically any development that's going to happen along the Biscayne Bay shoreline had to come through our committee. And when I first joined, landscape architect, that doesn't matter. This is the building we're going to build. Mm-hmm. And I said, no. A landscape architect must be on the job, must be part of the presentation, must be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. And that really was, I like to think, one of the beginnings of really shaping the shoreline that we have down here. So I sat on that committee for 12 years. And again, seeing all the developments that happened, and hopefully a little bit better than what they would have been if I didn't sit on there, was great.
Well, anyone watching this, Andy, and learning about your influence in those conversations to shape the shoreline and the look of the city, they'll experience Miami a little differently after gaining knowledge of your hand in that. So I want to move now to a final question before entering the space that I like to call the rapid round of questions. So in doing that, this last question requires some reflection back. We've been reflecting back and then we projected into the future. Now I want to reflect back. So let's go back, Andy, if you would, and remember the 18, 19, 20-year-old Andy Witkin. All right. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you were 18, 19, 20 years old?
But when I was 18, 19, 20, my hair was, down to about here.
So Are you
But what I wish I knew that life is not a sprint, it's really a marathon. And, when you're 18, 19, everything's hurry, you got to get it, answers right away, but really learned that life is really a marathon, and it's like a book with a lot of different chapters. And some of those chapters are not going to be that good. Some are going to be very good. But as long as I've learned from each chapter along the way, life gets much better, and hopefully things get better. But when you're 18 or 19, you don't realize that. And too many things just pass you by because you really didn't take the time to realize this is just a chapter. I guess it goes back to Mark Twain's saying, when I was 16, I couldn't believe how little my parents knew. When I was 21, I couldn't believe how much they'd learned. And it kind of goes with that. But really, everybody's life is like a book. And let's learn from each chapter, good or bad, and connect the dots backwards, as Steve Jobs said.
Yeah. I like that metaphor of a book. Our lives are series of chapters. Do you feel that we're the authors or are we the readers?
That's a good question. I think we're the authors. I think we have control over those chapters. I don't think we just, reading it. I think the more we know, the more control we have over some of the outcomes of those chapters.
Actually, before we get to the rapid questions, Andy, let me ask you one additional question. I'm going to slide this in maybe between the pages of this chapter that we're writing right now. We are talking in the month of October of 2021. You mentioned COVID earlier in the conversation. We're in the midst of COVID. We're not sure when it will end. This is an odd chapter in this book that we're authoring. How are you navigating COVID?
I think there have been some lessons learned. Again, some of the chapters are not all that great. COVID definitely has not been a good chapter, but I think we've learned some lessons. We've learned how to collaborate as a design firm probably more efficiently than we would have in the past. That has definitely been a good lesson learned. But I do think that design has changed, but lessons really have been learned. And I don't know if I really answered the question that well on that one.
Well, I think you did. COVID has set up a series of challenges for us. Might not be the best chapter we would want to write or leaf through, but it has afforded us ways to be more efficient or to take stock of what we thought we assumed or thought we needed to be doing, and then adjust accordingly. So
I think you hit the nail on the head. It forced us all to take stock. It forced us all to take a good, hard look at ourselves, both from a personal level and professional level. So I think in that respect, it was probably very good because it did force us to really take a good look.
Yeah, that sounds like an important chapter to read.
No, yes.
Listen, Andy, I have so enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's been a pleasure, as our previous conversations have been. So like I said earlier, the way I like to end these is with a series of short questions intended for just quick, spontaneous responses. I'm going to give you a question, respond as you see fit. Sound good?
Fair enough.
Okay, here we go. Oh, and by the way, these questions are all grounded in the Penn State experience. Okay. All right. So first, where did you live during your time at Penn State?
I lived off campus the entire time in I think it was called Mount Laurel Apartments. And then my last apartment was basically a basement apartment with a roommate, about 6 blocks off campus.
I know so many people who have a basement apartment story. I'll put you in the basement apartment club.
And when I went back 30 years later with my roommate, the pizza boxes were still there.
Oh my goodness. Okay, next question. What was or what is your favorite place on campus?
The Creamery. Well, who doesn't love the Creamery?
That's the right answer. If there was one standout moment or experience from your time at Penn State, what was that?
One standout moment. Uh, Can I take a pass on that one? One standout moment. Uh, Getting involved with some of the interleague, not interleague softball. I loved it. It was a group of guys coming together, forget about studying, let's just have fun. And I still remember those, softball games. And again, it's all part of that experience.
Nice. Where did you play the softball games? Do you remember?
I don't remember the fields. It was some, one of the baseball fields on campus. I don't remember exactly where.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the Creamery. Since that, I mean, you named it as a correct answer earlier. Let's just take it to the Creamery. So, Andy, you come back to State College. You and I go to the Creamery. What flavor of ice cream do you order?
Mint chocolate chip.
That's the right answer. Any flavor of Creamery ice cream is the right answer.
Absolutely.
Who was a person of influence for you at Penn State when you were a student?
That's it. Out of all the professors, probably Don Gerard was an amazing professor for me. Took a lot of time, spent a lot of time with me. So he was really a great influence for me.
Was he a professor of landscape architecture?
He was back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Remember that question about the 18, 19, 20-year-old Andy?
Yes.
All right. So think in that space. But if you could give an incoming Penn State student one piece of advice about how they might set themselves up for success as a student at Penn State and beyond Penn State, what piece of advice would you give them?
To get involved. Don't just be a spectator, be part of the experience. Don't just be on the fringes, but if there's something you believe in, get down into it and get down the middle and be part of it. And don't just watch it as a spectator.
Be part of it.
Yeah.
Be a spectator, get involved. Sounds like you gave yourself that same advice a long time ago. I've heard nothing in what you just said that doesn't sound exactly like who you are.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I had some great role models growing up, and it continued, at Penn State as just helping to shape me, the way I was, the way I am. So I've been very fortunate.
I would say so. Well, Andy, I'm going to let those words of wisdom be the last words in our interview. You're just a wonderful person. I always enjoy talking to you. You're an inspiration. You're generous. You're thoughtful, and you're genuine. So until we get a chance to talk again, congratulations again on your award and your being named a fellow of ASLA, and looking forward to next time. So take care of yourself. I've enjoyed this chat with you, and best wishes on everything.
It's been wonderful, and again, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always a pleasure speaking with you and being part of the Penn State experience.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Take care.